Hey everybody, Ken here, and I have another new toy to talk about. This is the Anomaly Drones Mosqyto Raptorial, and this is a stretched X machine and is designed for the ProSight system. Utilizes the race antenna if you choose to, and a standard antenna mount is also available, and has a host of other good features that we'll go over now. So Anomaly Drones continues to knock them out of the park as far as I'm concerned. These guys have so many smart, clever ideas built into these designs, and one of the things I like about them the most is that they protect the ProSight system. In all cases, on all their machines, the ProSight system is encased in rubber material, 3D printed rubber material, which really helps out when you get into a crash. I mean, look at the camera protection there. You're going to be hard pressed to damage that camera in a crash. Even when it hits the ground, you can see the camera is not likely to get damaged. And so these machines are very robust and very crash worthy, and they're very high performance, and they protect the expensive components very well. And what's not to like? So like I said, this is a stretched X version, and it's designed for a bottom mount battery. I cheated a little bit and used a Impulse RC Alien rubber piece there because I didn't have a rubber piece. I'll have to suggest to Anomaly Drones that they supply some rubber piece in the future. I did get an early version of this kit, so there may be some small tweaks and changes to it, as they are always improving the way these machines are put together. Like I said, the ProSight components are very well protected by these 3D printed mounts, and the nice thing about those too is they provide some vibration isolation. Amimon has always advised their ProSight system be protected from vibration as much as possible, and that's exactly what this system does, while also providing really good protection. One of the newest things here is, I believe this may be the first machine from Anomaly Drones that has removable arms, and the way they did it here is really slick. They used some captive fasteners, as you can see right here, in order to provide a quick way to secure the arms without having to resort to nuts. And there are a couple of additional fasteners in the center here that secure the inboard end of those arms, making a very, very strong sandwich here. And this is a very high quality carbon 4mm arms, 2mm bottom plates sandwiching the 4mm arms, and 3mm side plates. The only complaint I could have is that this thing is built like a tank, which is a good thing and maybe a bad thing. It's not the lightest weight machine that you can possibly buy, but I can tell you, if you hit stuff with this thing, it's not going to break. Or if it does break an arm, you can just replace the arm very easily. The frame itself weighs less than 140 grams, so it's not exactly a super weight either. It's still light. It's just not one of the hyper light, super light versions that are coming out that if you hit a tree branch, the thing explodes, which is fine with me. I mean, I personally do a lot of freestyle flying and not racing. The racing style machines still suit me though, because I like the bottom mounted battery. It actually seems to take less damage than your average crash. I use a little 3D printed battery protector, which a lot of people use for these types of machines now. And the stretched X format actually makes it really nice in a straight line cruise. And I like to cruise, a lot like racers do, close to the ground at high speed. It makes it very controllable, and it seems to have a positive effect on prop wash as well. So going on and looking at more of the detail of this design, I'm actually going to take off this top pod so you can see how it all fits together, and you can see some of the build details. Now, in my personal build, I used a 4-in-1 ESC. Not everyone does, but on a machine like this, it's really designed. It's kind of designed for a 4-in-1 ESC. The arms are pretty slim, and so if you look here, this is, I think, around 10mm. So you can use a really small ESC on the arm if you want, but the machine was really designed for a 4-in-1 ESC. And in this machine, I'm using the Aikon 30 amp 4-in-1. And one of the things I did, which I was experimenting around with this a little bit, I put the wires coming from the front motors in the front, which is a little bit of a risk to a prop strike. If you look here, the wires are subject to a prop strike. They really should be run around the back. But I will say that previously with these motors, this is the T-Motor F60 Pro, some people, including me, have been having some oscillation problems with these motors, going through the motions of trying to figure out what was causing it. One of the things I did was soft mount my flight controller, and in doing that, I didn't want to pack a bunch of motor wires through here to come around to the front leads on the ESC. So I ran them around the front, and I ran them up over this support standoff here. And in doing so, I made it very, very slightly more difficult for me personally to remove this pod. Normally, all you would need to do would be to loosen one screw here, one screw in the back, and this would allow the pod to shift forward, and you can see it'll go ahead and shift forward, but the way I've done it, I can't lift it up because I've got the wires going up over that support. So, in my case, I just need to remove this screw entirely, and remove this screw entirely. I know, this is a real pain, right? It's going to take me 15 seconds instead of 5 seconds. So then you can slide this pod forward and it comes right up off. And I'll go into some of the little details of what I did here to make this thing especially easy to remove. One of the things I did is I added an additional connector for the ProSight transmitter. And the reason I did that is because the transmitter connector on the ProSight, it's fragile. And I don't want to keep putting it in and out. These connectors on the ProSight, it may just be me being paranoid, but I chose to not mate and demate that connector as often. So I added another connector under here that I could easily use to remove the transmitter. In hindsight is 20/20, right? Looking back at it, because this connector is sitting right there on this build, it's right there, it's accessible, it's easy to pull off. This connector, the way I did this, is probably superfluous, and some would say that having additional connectors is not a good idea. So it's just personal preference. It's probably not absolutely needed. But you can see in a few seconds the top pod comes off and you have complete access to the ProSight system. And here we can get a little bit better look at how this is all mounted. So you can see that the rubber Ninja Tech Cheetah material 3D printed on either side of these 3mm frames. The transmitter just sandwiches in between them, as does the camera. The camera is removable without separating the side plates. You just two little screws right here. And thoughtful little touches go into this, you know, like those screws are plastic, right? That makes sense. If something crazy happens and you happen to hit a tree branch straight into the camera, it's a lot more likely that the camera can just break free and move back and avoid breaking the case of the camera or the lens or something like that. If those screws were metal, it'd be more likely that you might damage the case of the camera. Simple things, but they think of a lot of good things like this. These camera wires have plenty of room to float around. You know, some people have found that securing the camera wires provides less chance of pixelization or disconnection or such. We know the ProSight is a little bit sensitive to these camera cables. My personal experience has been that letting them breathe or letting them move seems to work best for me. Bapu, I think, uses some tape, some cloth tape to kind of hold them down on his machines. Again, not restricting them at the socket, but just kind of holding the wires from bouncing around too much. It's probably not a bad thing. But the little racing antenna piece just slides right in here. You know, this can slide out and be replaced very easily. There's little cutouts in here for the antennas to snap in, and then the bottom mount for this antenna the mount that comes with this antenna fits into the side plates there just by trimming off a couple little pieces of the base. Only needs to be done once, and it fits right into the rubber mount, and so you've got this nice flexible racing antenna mounted on top there. And because it's on top and sticking up, the reception is pretty good. I've had decent luck with this thing so far. I still haven't decided if I like the standard antenna better or the racing antenna. I like the robustness of the racing antenna, but at the same time, the reception is reduced, and for the type of freestyle flying that I do around trees and longer distances sometimes, I do like to maximize my range. So I can't provide like any real great direct recommendations for you guys on that yet. I need to fly with it more. So I mentioned that I had some oscillation problems with these motors. And on the RC Groups thread, there's some mention of that. And these motors have so much power that they just spin this prop so easily, and the response time is amazing. And because the response time is so fast, people theorize that it actually causes some oscillations as the flight controller tries to keep up. Now, I originally was running a Betaflight flight controller with these motors, and I could not solve the problem. The owner of Anomaly Drones actually told me he built his with a KISS flight controller, and it worked fine. I thought that was very interesting. I did a couple of things. I made a few changes at once, so I can't actually isolate yet exactly what solved the oscillation problem for me with these motors. But I did a couple things. One was I'd put in the KISS flight controller. The other thing was I bought these little bobbins from Ready Made RC, and Joshua Bardwell has mentioned these in his video. And they have a thread, an internal thread on the bottom and an external thread on the top. So you just screw them down on top of a bolt or a plastic standoff, and the combination of the KISS flight controller and the soft mount bobbins here has solved my oscillation problems entirely. And I am not currently soft mounting the motors. I did try that at some point. It did not help me, and I think every machine is different. You know, it depends on the resonance of the frame. Machines that have separate arms like this one tend to have a little bit more damping in the frame. That's a mechanical engineering phenomenon or theory, or it's been proved. I'm a mechanical engineer. I do work with vibration analysis sometimes, and it is true that bolted connections usually cause some vibration damping. The vibration transmitted through the arm is reduced through the bolted connection. This machine, unlike some of their other machines, doesn't have a specific receiver antenna mounting system. And what I did was I just used these zip ties that are already securing my wires on the arms here. I just ran the zip tie out the back, and I just get the propeller out of the way. I just ran the receiver wire down and through and into the zip tie, and those are at 90 degrees to each other, pretty much. And no reception issues there. The owner of Anomaly Drones actually told me all he did on his machine is he just coiled the antenna wires back in here and put the pod on, and it works fine for him. In my case, I've usually tried to make an effort to do something with the receiver antennas to keep them out in the open. With the 90-degree orientation relative to each other, you kind of are obeying the rules, so to speak, for antenna orientation. So on the flights I've had with this thing so far, I've had no issues whatsoever. So here you can see the detail in the front of the one thing I probably would do different. If I was going to do it again, I ran the motor wires through the front and over that standoff. I probably should have just run them around the back and kind of stuck them right through here. You can see there's a little space there. I just stuck them right through there and soldered them in there. And that's what was done in the pictures. If you look on the Anomaly Drones website, that's the way the owner did it. And I don't know why. I was just playing around, and after doing it, I kind of changed my mind. But I may go back and just kind of rewire it and take care of that problem. Now, one of the things I love about these 4-in-1 ESCs is the fact that, especially with the KISS flight controller, not all flight controllers have this, but the KISS flight controller has an output connector for all the PWM outputs. And so you just have one little connector going from the flight controller to the ESC, and it does all the motor signals and to ground. Now, chances are the order of those isn't going to work out. Just something to think about. I had to take the little pins out of here and rearrange them to get the correct motors to operate the correct corners. You can probably, if you're using a Betaflight flight controller, you might be able to remap the motors. I've never tried that. I don't know how to do that, so I didn't do it. But it might be possible. So I talked enough about how I had put the motor wires up over that standoff in the front that I kind of drove myself crazy. I was making the video and I decided to change it. I ran the motor wires behind the standoffs of the flight controller in the front there, and it still allows the flight controller to move around. Oh, there you can see it with the camera zoomed in a little bit more, how the flight controller can move around on those bobbins. Just a little bit of flexibility there. And now the motor wires run behind, so they're less likely to get struck by a prop. And when you go to put the pod on, it is like the simplest thing ever. I just connect my little connector here for the VTX power. And you just slide this guy down into these slots. It might be a little bit hard. You can see there's a catch right there. So it slides down and back. There we go. Just push it down and back like that. Look in there, make sure everything's comfy. And then all you need to do is tighten these two screws. One. Two. And that sucker isn't going anywhere. You can push on this as hard as you want, and it's not going to move. And that is clamped in there nice and tight. So if you haven't considered these machines before from Anomaly Drones, maybe take a look at their website. Check them out on anomalydrones.com. Happy flying!